You think you know this story. A favored younger son, a prophetic dream, a betrayal born of jealousy. You have heard it, you have read it, and perhaps you have drawn your own lessons about envy and forgiveness. But what if I told you that was just a thin layer of dust on a far greater legend? What if I told you that the magnificent cloak was not merely a gift, but an ancient key holding a secret that could change the world? That the betrayal was not just born from petty jealousy, but was fueled by a dark ambition and a deadly rumor? And what if the forgiveness at the end of the road was not a noble choice, but the only condition for an entire world to be saved from annihilation? This is not the story you were told. This is what truly happened. The corners of the tale that were never illuminated, the tears that were never recorded. Let us tear open the veil of time together to bear witness to the true story of Kaelen, the Star Reader. And before we begin this journey, let's pause for just a moment. Where are you listening to this from? A bustling city, a quiet town, a country far away? And what time is it on your clock? Leave a comment below so I know just how far the echoes of history are traveling across the globe today. Now take a deep breath. The gates of time are open. Upon the vast and unforgiving expanse of land known as the Serpent's Spine, where sand dunes shifted their forms with every storm, there lived a nomadic tribe that had survived for generations. They were the Volan people, children of the desert, their skin weathered by the sun and wind, their eyes always squinted toward the distant horizon. Their chieftain was Rorik, a man whose hair had taken on the color of dust and whose eyes held the wisdom of 1,000 starry nights. He had 12 sons, but his heart and his hopes were placed entirely in his youngest, Kaelen. Unlike his brothers with their powerful muscles and hunting prowess, Kaelen was slender and quiet. He was not a warrior, nor was he a skilled shepherd. He was a star reader. Since he was a child, Kaelen possessed an innate ability, a strange connection to the night sky. He could look upon the arrangement of the constellations and see omens, the whispers of destiny that others saw only as soulless points of light. His father, Rorik, recognized this special talent, and he saw it as both a gift and a burden. On a full moon night, as the entire tribe gathered around a great fire, Rorik called Kaelen to his side. He did not give him gold or weapons. Instead, he placed in his hands his most prized possession, the star-woven cloak. This was no ordinary, colorful robe. It was woven from the rarest velvet-smooth, midnight black wool, and upon it, with shimmering silver thread purchased from distant caravans, a master artisan had embroidered an exact map of the night sky. Every constellation, every star was in its proper place. The cloak was both a masterpiece and a symbol. "Kaelen," Rorik said, his voice low and resonant like the wind through a canyon. "This cloak is not just to keep you warm on cold desert nights. It is a reminder that though we walk upon the earth, our destiny is written in the stars. You are the one who can read that language. Cherish it and use it wisely." Kaelen accepted the cloak, his heart filled with reverence for his father. He did not know that, in the moment he draped it over his shoulders, he also draped upon himself the envy and hatred of his 11 older brothers. They stood in the shadows, watching the cloak glitter in the firelight. Garrick, the eldest, a mighty warrior who always felt overlooked by his father, clenched his calloused hands into fists, his stern face now etched with a line of pain. But more dangerous than all of them was Marek, the second-born. Marek had the eyes of a hawk and a heart of cold pragmatism. He wasn't just jealous of their father's affection, he coveted the secret knowledge he believed Kaelen possessed. To Marek, that cloak was not love, it was power, and that power he believed should have been his. That night, the fire of envy was kindled. It was only waiting for a gust of wind to erupt into an inferno. That wind did not take long to arrive. A few weeks later, during an evening gathering, Kaelen, with the innocence of youth, told his brothers of an image he had seen while gazing at the stars. "Last night I saw the strangest thing," he began, his eyes still sparkling with excitement. "I saw the 11 desert stars, the ones that guide our tribe, all shining brightly. But then a single brilliant North Star appeared, brighter than all the rest, and strangely, the 11 other stars slowly lowered themselves before it, as if they were bowing to a king." The moment he finished speaking, the air around the fire grew cold. Garrick scowled, his voice a low growl. "What are you trying to say? That you think you're that North Star, and that we, your older brothers, are meant to bow down to you?" Marek let out a sneer, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "More of your fanciful dreams. Stop being a child and learn how to hunt, little brother." But behind that scorn, a different thought sparked in Marek's mind. He didn't believe in prophecies, but he did believe in secrets. That star-woven cloak. It couldn't be a simple decoration. There had to be a reason their father treasured it so. And then Marek found it. One night, while Kaelen was sound asleep, Marek crept into his tent and stole the cloak. He took it out to where the full moon was at its brightest. At first, he saw nothing unusual, but when he turned the cloak inside out, his heart nearly stopped. Under the silver moonlight, threads that were once faint now glowed with a different light, forming new lines, ancient symbols woven between the constellations. This was no ordinary star chart. It was a true map, a path leading to a place that existed only in the whispers of the nomadic tribes, the Whispering Well. Legend said the well was an oasis blessed by the gods. Its water was not only pure and sweet, but it could heal any ailment, even grant the one who drank it eternal life. Whoever found it would become the master of the desert. Greed erupted in Marek like a hellfire. He no longer cared about omens or destiny. He saw only the path to absolute power. But there was a problem. The map was incredibly complex, and only a star reader like Kaelen could fully decipher it. Marek needed Kaelen, but he also wanted the secret for himself. A cruel plan began to form in his mind. He didn't just want to get rid of Kaelen, he wanted to steal the secret, and then erase his existence forever. The next day, Marek convinced his brothers, "That boy is a menace. His dreams will divide the tribe. We must teach him a lesson." He skillfully sowed fear and jealousy, but kept his discovery of the well a secret. They lured Kaelen to a remote canyon, lying that a prized goat had gotten lost. Kaelen, with his pure heart, suspected nothing. As he stepped into the canyon, his brothers surrounded him. "What are you doing?" Kaelen asked in panic. Marek stepped forward, his eyes as cold as stone. "Give me the cloak." "No, this was a gift from our father." Without another word, Marek and the others lunged. They tore the star-woven cloak from Kaelen's body. The sound of the silver thread snapping was like a scream of pain. They seized the precious fabric and then, without a moment's hesitation, threw their own brother down into a dry pit, an abandoned well. Kaelen fell, his back slamming against the hard, dry rock. He looked up to see 11 familiar faces looking down at him, blurring, then disappearing as they covered the opening with a large boulder. The light vanished. All that remained was darkness, pain, and the echo of betrayal. He had been buried alive by his own blood. In the thick, cold darkness of the pit, time became a meaningless concept for Kaelen. He knew only gnawing hunger, a thirst that burned his throat, and the ache of a shattered heart. He screamed until his voice was raw, but the only answer was the silence of the earth. Hope began to flicker and die like a candle in a gale. But destiny, once it begins to turn its great wheel, does not stop so easily. Just as Kaelen thought he was about to die, he heard noises from above. The boulder covering the well was rolled away, and a blinding beam of light made him squint. A rope was thrown down. He was being rescued. But this salvation opened another chapter of hell. His rescuers were not kind travelers. They were a caravan of slavers, men who saw human life as mere merchandise. Seeing that Kaelen was young and strong, they chained him with other unfortunate souls and began the long journey across the desert. After weeks of walking under the scorching sun, the caravan finally reached its destination. It was Lysandor, the city of 1,000 sails. The sight that greeted Kaelen was overwhelming. He, a son of the desert accustomed only to hide tents, now stood before a majestic port city built of white marble. 1,000 white sails, like the wings of giant seagulls, billowed in the harbor breeze. The air no longer smelled of dust, but of the sharp tang of sea salt and fish. The shouts of vendors, the clang of shipwrights' hammers, and the crash of waves against the seawall created a symphony of chaotic, vibrant life. But none of that beauty was for him. He was taken to the slave market, where he was displayed and inspected like an animal. Finally, he was sold to a man of powerful appearance. This was Lord Valerius, captain of the Sea Guard fleet, one of the most influential figures in Lysandor. Kaelen's life was now a silent routine of labor in Valerius's magnificent estate. He polished marble floors, tended to the gardens, and served at lavish feasts. But even as a slave, Kaelen's intelligence shone through. He learned the language of Lysandor with astonishing speed. He observed and memorized everything, from the arrangement of nautical charts in Valerius's study to the types of spices brought in from afar. Lord Valerius, a man weary of the political machinations of the court, soon noticed the difference in this slave boy from the desert. Kaelen didn't just work hard, he worked intelligently and efficiently. Once, when the old steward miscalculated the provisions for a long sea voyage, it was Kaelen who quietly pointed out the error, saving the fleet from a potential disaster. Gradually, Valerius began to trust him. From a cleaning slave, Kaelen was promoted to warehouse manager and then to his personal assistant, the unofficial steward of the entire estate. He had found a place, though he was still a slave. But as one door opened, another danger lurked in the shadows of the marble palace. That danger was named Lady Elara, the wife of Valerius. Lady Elara was the most beautiful woman in Lysandor, with hair as black as night and eyes the color of the sea. But behind that beauty was a soul filled with ambition and discontent. Her marriage to Valerius was merely a political arrangement, a gilded cage that imprisoned her. Elara craved power and freedom, and she saw an unusual spark in the young, intelligent steward. At first, she was simply drawn to his appearance and his mysterious silence. But when she realized the sharpness of his mind, Elara saw a potential tool. She began to find ways to approach Kaelen, not with vulgar seduction, but with shared confidences, with laments about her trapped existence. "You and I, Kaelen," she whispered one quiet afternoon while Valerius was at sea. "We are both prisoners in this house. I am imprisoned by a loveless marriage, and you are imprisoned by slavery. But you are clever. You could help me. And if I attain a higher station, I could set you free." Elara began to reveal her plan, a subtle plot to depose Valerius, framing him for treason to elevate one of her own relatives. She wanted Kaelen to be her eyes and ears, to use Valerius's trust to gather false evidence. Kaelen listened, and his heart grew cold. He had been betrayed once. He would never become a betrayer. Valerius, though his master, had treated him with respect. "My lady," Kaelen said with a low bow, his voice firm, "I am Lord Valerius's slave. My loyalty belongs to him." That refusal, however polite, was a sharp blow to Elara's pride. The admiration in her eyes turned to venom. If she could not make Kaelen an ally, she would destroy him. A few days later, when Valerius returned, Elara staged a perfect performance. She appeared before her husband in disheveled clothes, her eyes filled with tears. She didn't just accuse Kaelen of trying to assault her, she wove a more terrifying story. "He didn't just want to dishonor me," she sobbed. "He is a spy. I heard him muttering curses from the desert. He was drawing strange symbols on the floor. He did not come here to serve, but to scout our city for the barbarian tribes. It was a dual accusation, striking at the honor of a husband and the security of an empire. Valerius, though he had his doubts, was swayed by the evidence. A desert dagger Alara had secretly planted in Kaelen's room, and the pressure from his wife's powerful family. Rage overwhelmed reason. Kaelen was arrested. He was given no chance to defend himself. From the position of a trusted steward, he was thrown into the deepest, darkest place in all of Lysandor, the Sea Rock Prison. The Sea Rock Prison was no ordinary jail. It was carved deep into a great cliff by the sea, a place reserved for the Empire's most dangerous enemies, infamous pirates, traitors, and dark sorcerers. The air was thick with the smell of damp mold and despair. The sound of the waves crashing against the cliffs day and night was like the wailing of imprisoned souls. The only light came from flickering torches in the corridors, and the food was nothing but thin gruel and stale bread. This was the abyss. Kaelen had fallen from the favored son of a chieftain to a slave, and now, from a slave, he was no better than a dead man walking. Hope, this time, seemed to have been truly extinguished. In the darkness of his cell, he wondered where the stars had gone. Was the destiny he had once seen just a cruel joke? But even in the deepest darkness, the seeds of destiny were quietly sprouting. In the prison, Kaelen was jailed with two notable inmates. One was the royal cartographer, imprisoned for a minor error on a chart that caused a cargo ship to run aground. The other was the harbor master, accused of embezzlement. Both were men of status, and both were drowning in despair. One night they told Kaelen of the strange dreams that haunted them. The cartographer dreamed he was drawing a new map, but instead of ink, he used honey, and a swarm of bees flew in and covered the entire chart. The harbor master dreamed he was trying to weigh silver bars, but they kept melting into water and slipping through his fingers. Kaelen listened, and the knowledge of omens he thought was buried within him stirred. He calmly explained, "Your dream," he said to the cartographer, "shows that your talent will soon be recognized and bring you sweetness. And your dream," he turned to the harbor master, "is a warning that ill-gotten wealth will never last." He advised the cartographer to be patient and the harbor master to confess his crimes to receive leniency. Just 3 days later, Kaelen's interpretation came true. A new island was discovered, and the court urgently needed a detailed map. No one was better than the royal cartographer, and he was pardoned to undertake the task. At the same time, a major investigation into corruption at the harbor was launched. The harbor master, following Kaelen's advice, confessed and pointed out the ringleader, thereby receiving a significantly reduced sentence. A rumor about a prisoner who could interpret dreams began to spread through the prison, eventually reaching the warden. But it remained a minor story until the ruler of Lysandor himself was plagued by a nightmare. The Archon, the supreme ruler of Lysandor, a man of absolute power, had not slept for 2 straight nights. A terrifying nightmare haunted him. In his dream, he stood on the highest watchtower of his palace, looking out at the sea. 7 of the fleet's most majestic warships, with their sails full and hulls strong, were heading out. But then, from the depths of the sea, 7 other ships rose. They were decrepit, their hulls covered in slimy seaweed, their sails tattered like spiderwebs. These 7 ghost ships lunged forward and swallowed the 7 mighty warships whole. The Archon awoke, drenched in sweat. The next night, the dream returned, but this time it was different. He saw fishermen pulling up 7 nets teeming with shimmering silver fish. The entire city rejoiced, but immediately after, they pulled up 7 more nets, completely empty, dripping with a foul, black sludge that spread out and turned the rich sea into a dead pool. Deeply troubled, the Archon summoned all the mages and wise men of the kingdom, but not one could explain the meaning of these dreadful dreams. It was then that the warden of the Sea Rock prison, hoping to gain favor, reported on the strange prisoner from the desert. Desperate, the Archon commanded, "Bring him to me." Kaelen was brought from his dark cell to the magnificent throne room of the Archon. He wore ragged prison clothes, but he stood tall, and his eyes, now accustomed to darkness, held a strange serenity. The Archon recounted his 2 dreams. When he finished, the entire hall was silent. All eyes were on the prisoner from the desert. Kaelen took a deep breath. He didn't just interpret the dream, he delivered a terrifying prophecy, a warning that would decide the fate of the entire empire. "Great Archon," Kaelen's voice echoed clear and sharp, "your 2 dreams are in fact one. The gods are sending you an urgent message about the destiny of Lysandor. The 7 mighty warships and the 7 nets full of silver fish, they represent 7 years of prosperity to come. The sea will be generous, voyages will be successful, and the treasury of Lysandor will be full." He paused, letting those good words sink in. Then his voice dropped, carrying a chilling coldness. "But the 7 decrepit ships and the 7 nets of black sludge, they are an omen for 7 years of great calamity that will follow. A disaster unlike any other will strike. The gods call it the Great Salt Blight. A mysterious plague from deep in the desert will be carried by the winds to the sea, causing the seawater to become unnaturally salty. The fish will die, salt will crystallize on the coastal lands, destroying the crops. Lysandor, an empire that lives by the sea, will slowly die by the sea." The court was stunned into silence. The prophecy was too terrible, too specific. But Kaelen did not stop. However, the gods did not only send a warning, they also showed a path to survival. "You must act immediately. Appoint overseers across the empire, build massive freshwater reservoirs, and fortified granaries. During the 7 years of prosperity, we must store 1/5 of all food and clean water. Only then can Lysandor endure the 7 years of the Great Salt Blight without being destroyed." The plan was audacious, incredibly detailed, coming from a slave prisoner. The Archon looked deep into Kaelen's eyes. He saw no madness or deceit. He saw wisdom, certainty, and the bearing of a man who carried destiny on his shoulders. "Who are you?" the Archon asked. "I am merely one who knows how to read the language of the stars." An unprecedented decision was made. "You," the Archon declared, his voice booming through the great hall, "who has seen the coming darkness and shown us the path of light. From this day forward, you are no longer a prisoner. I name you the Keeper of the Tides, and I grant you full authority over this plan. The life of Lysandor is in your hands." From a prisoner in the abyss, Kaelen had, in a single step, ascended to the pinnacle of power. He had become the savior of the very people who had imprisoned him. 7 years of prosperity passed exactly as Kaelen had foretold. Under his direction, Lysandor built a great system of granaries and freshwater reservoirs. Kaelen, with his wisdom and fairness, earned the respect of the entire empire. He was no longer a foreigner. He had become an indispensable part of Lysandor. Then the 8th year arrived. The Great Salt Blight descended. The sky remained blue, but the sea began to change. The water grew saltier, and fish washed ashore in massive numbers. Coastal lands became saline, and crops withered. Neighboring empires, dependent on sea trade, quickly fell into crisis and famine. But Lysandor, thanks to its thorough preparations, stood firm. The storehouses were opened, and clean water was distributed. Kaelen was hailed as a living saint. Meanwhile, in the Serpent Spine Desert, the disaster was even worse. The Great Salt Blight not only affected the sea, but it also dried up the scarce underground water sources. Oases withered and died. Animals collapsed from thirst. The Volan tribe, once proud, now faced annihilation. Chieftain Rorik had passed away from old age and a broken heart. The burden now fell on the shoulders of Garrick and his brothers. Desperate, they heard rumors of a coastal empire named Lysander, where a wise keeper had stored enough food to sell to other nations. With no other choice, 10 of the brothers, the youngest, Benjamin, was kept behind as the only remaining son of Rorik's beloved second wife, made the arduous journey across the dying desert to Lysander to beg for life. When they reached the port city, they were stunned by its prosperity and order. They were led to the residence of the keeper of the tides. Entering the great hall, they saw a man in elegant robes, his face resolute but his eyes strangely deep, sitting on an intricately carved chair. As was custom, they bowed low, their foreheads touching the cold marble floor. They had no idea who this powerful man was. 17 years had passed. The desert and power had changed a man. But Kaelen, looking down from his high seat at the 10 haggard, familiar faces, recognized them instantly. A whirlwind of emotions churned within him, the pain of betrayal, the satisfaction of power, a bitterness for their plight, and an unexplainable curiosity. He wanted to know if, after all these years, they had changed. He signaled for the interpreter. His voice was cold and distant. "Where do you come from?" "Sir, we come from the desert," Garrick replied, his voice trembling. "We have come to buy food." Kaelen looked at them, and the old dream of 11 stars bowing to the North Star flashed through his mind. "You look more like spies than merchants to me. You have come to scout Lysander's weaknesses during our time of trouble." They frantically denied it, telling him about their family, their old father who had passed, and the youngest brother left at home. Hearing this, Kaelen's heart ached. He had to turn away to hide a tear that threatened to fall. A test formed in his mind. He agreed to sell them grain, but he secretly instructed his guards to place an object in the sack of Benjamin when they returned for a second time. It was not a silver cup. It was Kaelen's most prized possession, his personal star compass, a sophisticated nautical instrument that only the leaders of the Lysandrian fleet possessed. When the brothers, this time with Benjamin, returned for more grain, they were stopped just as they were leaving the city gates. The guards searched their sacks and found the compass in Benjamin's possession. The crime was clear: stealing a military secret of the empire. It was a crime punishable by death. They were dragged back before Kaelen. Benjamin was so terrified he couldn't speak. The brothers' faces were drained of all color. They knew it was a setup, but they were powerless. "The thief will remain here as my slave for life," Kaelen declared, his gaze as sharp as a dagger fixed on Garrick. "The rest of you may go." This was the moment of truth. Kaelen wanted to see if they would abandon Benjamin just as they had abandoned him. The hall was deathly silent, and then Garrick, the proud eldest brother, the mighty warrior, did something no one expected. He collapsed to his knees, not out of fear, but from an overwhelming, soul-crushing pain. "Sir," he cried, his voice breaking, "please take me. Let me be your slave in his place. Our father already lost one son that he loved dearly. If we return without Benjamin, the grief will kill him. I promised my father I would protect him. Please take my life, but let my brother go home." Hearing those words, the wall of ice that Kaelen had built around his heart for 17 years began to melt. He saw the regret, the maturity, and the love in Garrick's eyes. He could no longer contain himself. He ordered all the guards and servants to leave. When only he and his 11 brothers remained in the hall, Kaelen stood up and stepped down from the dais. He looked directly at them, and for the first time he spoke in the language of the Volan tribe, the familiar tongue of their childhood. Tears streamed down his face. "I am Kaelen." Those 3 words struck the 11 men like a bolt of lightning. They looked up, stunned. They looked into the deep eyes of the keeper, and now they saw the shadow of the little brother they had cast away so many years ago. Shock quickly turned into absolute terror. They had sinned against the second most powerful man in the empire. Death was certain. But then Kaelen said something that changed everything. "Stand up," he said, his voice now gentle. "Do not be afraid and do not blame yourselves. You sold me out of greed for a myth, for the rumor of the whispering well." They were astounded. How did he know? "But destiny has a twisted sense of humor," Kaelen continued, and this was the twist no one could have anticipated, the final key to the story. That myth is real, and it is the only answer for all of us. This great salt blight, the one that is killing the sea and the desert, can only be healed by the pure waters of the whispering well. He looked at the petrified faces of his brothers. "I may be the keeper of this empire. I can command an entire fleet. But I am not a man of the desert. I do not know the way there, the map on that cloak. You yourselves tore it to pieces. One piece led me here, but the other pieces I do not have." He looked directly at Garrick and Marek. "Only you, the true sons of the desert, who grew up with the old stories, can piece together those fragments of memory. Only you can lead the way." In that moment, everything changed. Kaelen's forgiveness was no longer a gift bestowed from on high. It was a necessity. It was an invitation. He wasn't just forgiving them, he needed them. They were not just being absolved of their past sins, they were being given a new purpose in the present, a mission not just to save their family, but to save the entire world they knew. The brothers had to be united once more, not by blood, but by a common goal. They had to combine Kaelen's knowledge of the stars with their experience of the desert to undertake one final journey together. A journey to find salvation, not just for the land, but for their very souls. Kaelen's journey teaches us something profound. Destiny is sometimes not the rose-strewn path we are given, but the rugged trail we must find for ourselves after falling into the deepest chasm. And sometimes forgiveness is not the end of a painful story, but the only key that can unlock a new, greater, and more essential chapter. Does forgiveness become more powerful when it is not a choice, but a requirement for survival? What do you think of this fateful twist, where the victim and the perpetrators must work together to save their own world? Leave a comment below about Kaelen, the power of forgiveness, and how destiny can turn tragedy into an epic. And if the story of Kaelen and his brother's journey of redemption has touched you, if you believe that every legend holds a lesson for our lives today, then journey with our channel by hitting that subscribe button and the bell icon beside it, because every legend is a star and we still have countless other stars to decipher together. Thank you for listening.